It took just 24 hours for us to lose control of the city. Tonight, Gotham's relying on one man to save us all.
Endings are hard. When creating fiction, forming a beginning and middle is child's play compared to ending that story. The ending is literally the last thing creators leave players, and if that ending is good or bad, the entire series molds around the quality of that finale. Arkham Knight marks the closure of the Arkham franchise, and let me be clear here. Arkham Knight is the best ending to the franchise that could have ever been created. Mechanically, story-wise, and graphically, this is the best Batman game ever crafted with some of the darkest and deepest moral questions asked in the history of the franchise. Arkham Knight takes place months after the crumble of Arkham City and the death of the clown prince of crime, the Joker. The city of Gotham is surprisingly crime-free for a little while. That's until Scarecrow returns to Gotham with the goal of destroying and plunging the city into fear, and eventually revealing Batman for the coward that he sees him as. After driving the citizens of Gotham out of their own home, Batman goes after Scarecrow as the mystery of what Scarecrow's real plan contains starts to unravel during the longest night of Batman's entire life. Part of Scarecrow's plan is the Arkham Knight. Sporting a strikingly similar cosmetic design to the Cape Crusader, the Arkham Knight is a militaristic masked mercenary with a massive army of men and drones that have descended into Gotham to help the Scarecrow in its quest to ultimately kill and humiliate the Batman. If you haven't heard of the villain before in other comics or movies, it's because Arkham Knight is an original character created by Rocksteady Studios, but who is under the mask is an extremely integral part of the game's story arc that plays into the deep and engrossing mystery around the Scarecrow and his true motives. I've always had an affection for the Arkham games as a whole, but I've always specifically admired their stories because they all start off with a very simple mystery or idea that slowly unravels into an almost unrecognizable but simple adventure. Arkham Asylum opens with a simple breakout, but ended with a citywide super toxic conspiracy. Arkham City opened with a strange prison and ended with a proposed citywide genocide and a dead Joker. Arkham Knight has a similar setup but with grander results and the most compelling plot lines the series has ever seen to date. The idea of Scarecrow wanting to spread his new and improved fear toxin isn't anything new. It's highlighted in almost every piece of content that features the Scarecrow. But the thing that keeps the plot fresh is the people surrounding the conspiracy. For the first time in Arkham history, Arkham Knight prominently features all major members of the Bat family, including Nightwing, Oracle, Robin, and Alfred. Seeing the interactions between each member and Batman humanizes the godlike image of the Dark Knight. One of the major flaws of the previous games was that Batman never felt human. He was always this morally righteous, bulked out, crime-fighting hero who never showed any real emotions until Arkham Origins or in the Scarecrow sections of Arkham Asylum. In this iteration, however, Batman is still a composed hero, but one who is constantly feeling and reflecting on his past mistakes and actions when talking and protecting the ones closest to him. It was deeply refreshing to see Batman constantly making choices and moves that weren't extraordinarily calculated to the highest degree, but ones that were made out of passion and love rather than cold, hard facts. Scarecrow is a character that infects and corrupts the minds around him, and Batman isn't any exception to the rule. Seeing the psychosis of Batman being delved into and inspecting what truly is Batman's greatest fear was a fascinating mystery to solve. Rocksteady finds new and impressive ways to really personify the inner struggle and hurt that Batman is feeling and dealing with on a daily basis. A clear theme throughout the entire run of the game was that Batman is as crazy as the villains he fights. Seeing how Bruce Wayne deals with that dynamic and where he focuses his inner battle brings another layer of humanity to a character that historically doesn't usually have much. This is the first game where Batman is consistently and openly afraid of Scarecrow and his plan. There are sequences in the game that illustrate inner fear with horror elements such as jump scares and unexplainable events. Somehow those sequences not only work perfectly with the story, but they're also some of my favorite parts of the game because they focus heavily on the emotional trauma that losing a family member or friend brings to someone, even if that person is Batman. Gotham City is a major part of the game because not only is Scarecrow trying to take down the entire city with his toxin, but it's also where Batman is placing his mark. The majority of Gotham is completely free to roam and explore. Since Gotham is a large open world, traversal and gliding gets a bit old after a while, so that's where the Batmobile comes into play. Completely drivable and combat ready, the Batmobile is simultaneously the best and worst parts of Arkham Knight. At pretty much any time, you can call the Batmobile to your position by the press of a button and use it any way you see fit. There are two modes to the Batmobile, combat and driving. Just by pressing a button or holding it down depending on the control scheme you use, you can switch between both on the fly. The driving is the most useful, making the Batmobile into an almost unstoppable bullet of speed that's the most reliable and fastest way to get to any destination. Having the Batmobile as a backup when gliding and running around the city gets a bit boring is a useful and fun tool. The physics behind driving feel tight and grounded. There's no slippery floor or floaty physics. Each turn and movement in the Batmobile feels grounded and steady. There's also a lot of room for errors when driving due to the various amount of destructible environments included in the game. Pillars, fences, entire walls, and much more are all destructible, making the entire experience very forgivable and a rarely frustrating time. Some of the most fun I've had in the entire game was driving and chasing down an enemy vehicle, then launching myself from the Batmobile and ripping the driver out of the car from the windshield and commencing a brawl. Moments like that really occur every time I play, and the Batmobile adds so much variety to that, and it never gets old. The combat mode is an entirely different beast on its own. With switching over to combat mode, the Batmobile turns into a tank for all intensive purposes. Strapped with a 60mm cannon, machine guns, non-lethal bullets, and an EMP, the Batmobile mows down regular goons and bad guys like nothing. The major reason for the combat is for fighting the Arkham Knight's militia of unmanned drones. This is the least Batman thing you can do in the entire game. Fighting and blowing up tanks is really fun, but it doesn't feel like it has a place in the game. Rocksteady tries to make it as organic as possible by adding a combat system like the free flow combat that we see when fighting regular goons, but instead of taking down men, you're taking down remote control robots. It's a fun distraction, but it's absolutely frustrating when it becomes a major final boss battle between bad guys. It felt like I was in the Batmobile shooting tanks more than I was gliding around beating up bad guys, and that shouldn't be the case whatsoever. For a game so focused on showing Batman and his human struggle, it feels weird that you're playing as a tank for a lot of the combat sections. It's a fun time, but it's time that feels could have been spent fleshing out more of the on-foot combat or even story. The hand-to-hand combat isn't massively improved, but it's just refined to the highest caliber. When looking at previous Arkham games, they each have fighting mechanics that were excellent, and Arkham Knight just adds on to that with a wide variety of past and new tools from Batman's utility belt. I love seeing some of my favorite weapons come back, but it felt like there could have been a better way to implement the cycling between each weapon. You see, instead of the weapons being mapped to a portion of the D-pad so you can switch to the tools on the fly like previous games, they're now mapped to one menu, which freezes the game and lets you choose a tool from a weapon wheel. This felt slow and sluggish to say the least, by breaking up combat and Predator missions every single time I wanted to take out a Batarang or the Batclaw. The weapons themselves are awesome, but I really wish there would have been a better way to organize them so it could be a bit snappier and neater. The best new tools are the voice synthesizer and the Batmobile remote control. The voice synthesizer allows Batman to create the voice of a villain and strategically order around their goons to do his bidding, and the Batmobile remote control is pretty self-explanatory, but it allows Batman to control the Batmobile in really extraordinary ways by ordering around the Batmobile to help assist in certain combat situations, adding a sense of real strategy to the video game. Now, the story of Arkham Knight has some fantastic twists and reveals that are extraordinary. I can see why Arkham Knight's identity might leave some feeling angry or disappointed, but to me it feels right at home with the game's tone and what they are trying to achieve with the story. The believability of reveals like that and many more are driven home with the outstanding voice acting of people like Kevin Conroy as Batman, Ashley Greene as Oracle, Matthew Mercer as Robin, and Troy Baker as the Arkham Knight and many other characters. And the absolutely incredible screen actors turned voice actors Jonathan Banks as Jim Gordon and John Noble as Scarecrow. The expert level of acting and believability brought about some of the most emotional moments in the entire series and had me tearing up and exploding with emotion at parts where I usually wouldn't feel anything other than a light smile or frown. The best performance in this game by far was from Jonathan Banks of Breaking Bad fame, who depicted Jim Gordon, and this was by far the best representation of the character to date, with really heartbreaking motives and actions that transform the character from disposable background person to an actual amazing standout. Arkham Knight is a special game filled with heart, passion, and finality. This is a fitting and perfect end to an amazing franchise that pioneered the idea that licensed games can not only be good, but in some cases masterpieces. Arkham Knight features amazing voice acting coupled with extraordinary characters and perfected fighting and traversal systems that add to replayability. All of this is housed inside one of the best looking Arkham games to date, with beautiful animation and amazing graphics. I do feel like Arkham Knight could have been better in terms of vehicle combat balance as well as organization in terms of the tools, but Arkham Knight is an amazing game and a must play for any Batman fan, but most importantly, anyone who likes amazing and well crafted video games. I give Batman Arkham Knight a 9.6 out of 10. For the full written review, you can go over to rajformer.tumblr.com and check it out.